messing around.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm really happy to see you. I was just
Yeah,
thinking
I'm
about
really
you.
happy.
I was talking to the person who's writing the book about New Girl and talking about you.
Wait, what book about New Girl?
Someone's writing a book about New Girl. I gave an interview. I'm sure they'll come to you last.
Really?
Yeah.
I genuinely haven't. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like a full like giant book by this journalist.
Wait, it's not Jessica Radloff, is it?
Was it Jessica? No.
Who did the Big Bang Theory book?
No.
Someone else.
Yeah.
Ooh, well, hopefully this podcast is helpful to them. They could just listen to this podcast
I'm
because we've
sure.
had everybody on and everybody's been really like honest about their experience
How
and
honest.
pretty honest.
Wow.
Pretty honest about their experience, which has been nice. It's been really nice for Lamorne and I because we've learned so much stuff that happened that we didn't know happened.
Right.
So I guess this book will lend itself to that too. So today, Max, we are having what we call a Loft meeting. You directed 7 episodes across season 2 and 3, including the season 3 premiere. Right now we are in the middle of ending season 2 on the podcast. We're near the end. So you are the perfect guest to kind of help us transition from season 2 to season 3. What was your New Girl origin story? Like, how did you get involved and how did you get to
Yes.
direct your first episode?
It's two-pronged things. It was a relationship with Jake Johnson that started probably 7 years before New Girl, where I was making a web series with Clark Duke and Michael Cera called Clark and Michael, and we were filming the finale of it. It was like a very ahead of its time web series. I say that not patting myself on the back, but patting Michael and Clark on the back. And it was like a web series before web series is basically where you had it was like I think it was like the one of the first ones with like two people's first names, and we were filming the finale, and it's a scene where Michael Cera has to audition for a network television show, and his scene partner in the audition room um, improvised with Michael Cera in a way. I'd never met anybody in my life that was as funny as Michael Cera or could go toe to toe with him improvisationally. And this guy had a mustache, and there was something dangerous about him. And there was something that was just I had never seen before. It was a fully formed comedic voice that I hadn't seen. It wasn't like, oh, he's doing this, or he comes from Apatow, or he comes from Vince Vaughn and those guys. Like, and I was like, who is this fucking guy?
Hmm.
And I went and I met him. I said, hey, I'm Max. And he said, hey, I'm Jake. And it was Jake Johnson, and we fell in love. And he took me to like this cop bar. It was our first date. He took me to like this cop bar. And we started talking about why we felt like The Deer Hunter was a comedy and why we wanted comedies to feel more like that. And he's from a very specific part of Chicago, grew up in car dealerships and, collecting junk and putting it in the back of a pickup truck. I grew up in Los Angeles on the West Side, and we were like the odd couple, and we immediately were like
Hmm.
no one. We had no we had no representation. We had no managers. We had no age, or maybe he had an agent, but like no one gave a shit about either of us.
Right.
And we started writing shows. We pitched a show. We ended up doing this insane television show that we filmed in my backyard, that we wrote like a 155-page Bible for, about a guy who goes on a reality show about being a prisoner of war and has a nervous breakdown and thinks it's all very real, which is very Jake, obviously.
Sure.
And and we somehow attached we somehow attached, by this point then I had an agent. UTA was like, you guys got to meet the reality television producers of Breaking Bonaducci. We're like, great, we'll do that. So we end up going, we somehow get in the door to pitch with Jake, me, and the reality television producers of Breaking Bonaducci. We go in, no one knows who any of us are. We stop the pitch, we put in a DVD of the thing we filmed, and people are like, and we're gonna leave behind this 175-page Bible. You guys can read it. We won't pitch it. Needless to say, nobody bit. Like, it was one of the great failures of Hollywood history. And we constantly were trying to make things. We wrote so many movies that no one has ever seen or knows about. And it wasn't. I made my first movie, and the first thing I did was cast Jake Johnson, and it was called Ceremony. And I couldn't get the financiers. The financiers were too intimidated by him, so I had Jake meet with this financier who was this like really gentle, nice Mexican billionaire who had like concerns about Jake, like as a person. And I was like, Jake, you need to do your hair weird. You need to shave your mustache, and you need to go in a suit. And Jake bought a suit. I don't believe he owned a suit at the time. And he went and he met with this guy, and they let me hire him. And simultaneously, I was now like kind of like a writer and a director and like wanting to make my first movie. And there was a script that everybody was obsessed with, and it was called Fuck Buddies. And it was the most brilliant romantic comedy I'd ever read. Everyone's like, no, it's like a modern day Harry and Sally. Like, it's going to bring romantic comedies. Like, none of them are. This actually was that. It was the greatest script I had read about from the male and female perspective of dating and sex. Everyone was lined up and wanted to direct it, and everyone wanted to star in it. And I couldn't believe how funny and sad, and it was like, it kind of, I was like, who the fuck wrote this? And everyone's like, it's this playwright. She's from Michigan. She's just moved to town, and like the town was like, everyone was talking about Liz Merriwether, this writer. And I ended up becoming friends with her. I don't remember. I think it was through Jason Reitman, maybe, who ended up producing the first movie with Jake. But I became really close with Liz, and we talked about Les Miserables and our favorite plays, and we loved hanging out. And she ended up meeting my friends, one of whom was named Schmidt. And
Really?
Yeah, my best friend's named Schmidt.
Get out of town. Okay.
Yeah. And she thought my group of friends, just like Jake Johnson, was very funny and strange, and I adored her and loved her, and we became friends simultaneously. Now, by the time my movie was made and I was editing my movie, we couldn't afford an editing room, so I was editing it in my house, in my childhood bedroom. And Liz Merriwether was now a very, very hot writer, getting paid money to rewrite movies, one of whom being a movie that I wrote with my friend Matt Spicer and my friend Jonah Hill that Akiva Schaffer was going to direct, called Adventurer's Handbook. They were rewriting that movie to go into production that never ended up going into production downstairs. I was editing my movie upstairs, so Liz would keep coming upstairs and watching scenes for me and giving me thoughts. And she kept seeing Jake and obviously fell in love with Jake. Now, simultaneously, Ivan Reitman was ending up directing Fuck Buddies, which was now called No Strings Attached. And Liz and I both, and Jason Reitman, wanted Jake to be in No Strings Attached. So Ivan came to our screening room or our editing room, and we showed him No Strings Attached. And we all did whatever we could to make it happen, because we knew, like, being around Jake at that time period was like being around a time bomb. Like, you knew he had this unique set of skills, and he has something that very few movie stars have, which is you either want to have sex with him or have a beer with him, and some people want to do both. And he ended up getting the part, and we stayed best friends, and we stayed working together, and he had an amazing time working with Liz and everyone on that movie. And by the time New Girl came around, he was really set up to do it. He still tested and everything, but it was great. And Liz and I stayed friends throughout that whole process too. I had made that movie. That movie had come out around the first season of New Girl. No one gave a shit about it. It did terribly. And I really wanted...
I gave a shit about it. I saw Ceremony and I loved it.
Thank you. You'd be the one.
So much. But
You'd
truly...
be the one. Thank you.
I did. I remember watching it, and I remember loving it. And I was like, wow, it's rare to see films like this anymore. I remember where I was when I watched it, actually.
Where were you? On an airplane?
No, I was in a friend's living room. And I feel like people were like kind of wandering in and out, and I was just like wrapped. I was in it.
That was a theatrical experience too. People were just coming in and realizing. So needless to say, that movie came out. I needed money because I was broke. And all I wanted to do was... New Girl became, as you know, just a supernova. It became this magical thing, like kind of the last one that was just beloved by everybody. Everybody watched it. It was a live experience. People would talk about it the next day. Zoe doing television at that era was like unprecedented. She was like a
Yeah.
movie star. She was beautiful. She was talented. She was funny. It captured what I never watched Friends, believe it or not, but it captured what everyone said about Friends, which was you just want to be with these people and you want these people in your living room. And I really, really wanted to direct it. A, because I was broke, and B, because I wanted to hang out with you guys because I was such a fan of the show. And everybody did everything they could. Like Liz did everything she could. Jake Kasdan was super helpful. And Jake obviously fought for me. And then by the time it was, first season was so hard to get. It was like these crazy feature directors like coming in and doing television. It was wild. And then by second season, they were like, we'll find a slot for you. We don't know what episode it's going to be. I was like, they're like, just be ready. I was like, bro, I have nothing.
You're
And
like, I'm ready.
yeah, like I'm ready. Like, just let me know. And that was my story. So it was like through the back door, basically.
Wild. I had no idea that your relationships ran so deep with Jake. Like, I knew you were
Beyond.
friends and knew that you guys knew each other, but I didn't realize that you guys had been trying to find a way to work together, be together, and continue it creatively for that long.
Beyond. He's like my brother. He's like my older brother. I still call him about stuff when I'm having a hard time about being a dad, or I just had to put my dog down recently, and the first person I called was Jake, if that says anything.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It was for the best.
It's interesting because he serves that purpose for, I think, so many of us.
Yeah.
Like, I always call him my unofficial manager.
Yeah.
Like, I'll call him like when I get an offer or something comes through and I'm like, should I do this? Does this matter? Should I fight for this point in the deal? And he's the only person I truly believe will tell me the truth. He's the person who'll just be like, this is about ego. Forget this. Why are you talking about this part? This is what you need to focus on. This is what you need to push for. I know Lamorne, the same thing with Lamorne. He's just become this like de facto, like super honest big brother that genuinely has your interests at heart, but will also tell you when you're being a real idiot about something. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful relationship to have, and it's rare. I don't have many people like that in my life.
No, it's there. But Lamorne is an incredible person too. And
Yeah. I mean, he's like my real like brother, because we just kind of came into that world and had no idea about anything and just felt so lucky. I remember Jake actually was the one who talked me into like finally selling my like old beater car, because he had just done it himself. Jake and I walked that path too of just being like, is it safe to do so? Like, are we actually going to keep a job? Are we actually going to make money? What is this? And he was one of those people, at least for me, where Jake just didn't front. You know what I mean? There wasn't like the pretension of fronting.
Person I've ever met.
Yeah, it's really special. It's funny you talk about fuck buddies because I think I like blocked it out because I wanted it so badly. And so my brain just went like, let's just get rid of this like trauma and hurt. But I auditioned for it. I auditioned for that role and had no idea who Liz was. But I remember having the same reaction when I just read the sides. I didn't get the script because I was like, nobody. They just sent me like my one page of sides. Right. And just reading that, I was like, who wrote this voice?
I know.
It was so special. But Ivan Reitman was in the room, who in Canada, I mean, for everybody was like a huge hero, but like in Canada is the guy.
Yeah.
And I think I just walked in and the whole thing felt so surreal that I was standing in front of Ivan Reitman that I was like fully out of my body. Like I said the words, but I couldn't focus on what was happening. Yeah. And then Mindy got the role.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, Greta, Mindy, Jake. It was... Yeah, the script was unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And then at the same time, I remember like another movie with a very similar name, but similar premise came out, right? And people got them confused all the time.
Yeah,
which was
it was the Dante's Peak volcano Pythagorean theorem.
Right, it was like a very weird thing.
Independence Day, Deep Impact, No Strings Attached, Friends with Benefits.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was called. I need to ask you this because we put out there that we were talking to you, And I would say 9 out of the 10 questions that kind of came in were all about you directing probably in the top 3 most iconic New Girl episodes of all time,
Yeah.
which is
Are you talking about
cool.
Tinfinity? It was.
No. I was for me, by the way. Tinfinity was huge for me because for my storyline, I was like, whoa, they're really like investing in this and
Right.
pushing this forward in season 2. And I'll never forget, there was so many weird things that happened in shooting that episode. And the thing I'll never forget is being under a tent and it was raining and it was cold and there was like this thing around this jacket I had to wear. But I'll never forget your like just relentless, infectious enthusiasm of just genuinely being so happy to be there and to do the scene. And it was like really nice. It was really
Um,
nice. Like you were excited to work with actors as
yeah.
opposed to being like caught up in the thing or like feeling stressed. It
Right.
was like you just like
I'm
you
glad.
you got how like lucky we all were to do it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us at that point had been kind of like getting a bit grumpy
Yeah.
because that was a bit of a confusing episode. But I just remember you walking in with like the biggest smile in your face and being like, all right, we get to do this.
Wow.
And
So
it
happy
was,
to have that reflected to me because it didn't feel like that at the time.
no, I
But that's
remember
great
that because
directing.
I was feeling overwhelmed and you did something that, brilliant directors do, which is like you got me to forget about like what my personal experience was and to remember,
Right.
one, I'm really lucky to be here. And two,
Right.
this day of work's going to be like really fun and we're going to get to go with it. And none of the other things matter as long as we're just like going
Right.
to dive right into this scene. I
Right.
remember
Right.
that clearly.
Okay. Good.
But that's not the episode people
No.
ask about. They ask about Cooler.
Yes.
And the most iconic moment at the end of that episode. And people want to know how much of it came from the director, how much of it came from the script, how much of it was just the magic of Jake and Zoe. Like, what do you remember of that big moment?
It was my first episode. It was my
Wild.
first job in TV, really. And I had no idea what it was. I just saw it just said like 207 or 206, the cooler. And it was like a full like Aaron Sorkin type like just like the network is involved, the studios involved, like the kiss was such a big deal. The whole episode is actually really good. But the kiss was like everyone was involved. There was just like there was so much tension. It was like an incredible television experience I've never had really, where the stakes were so high. Because it's different when you film something and then it comes out a really long time ago in like a bundle or a drop. Like it was so important. And like we filmed that on the last day, I believe. The kiss was on the last day. The it just was like it was a really, I felt like really lucky to be there, and it felt really cool, and it felt really great that I got to do it with Jake, and that I got to do it with Liz, and I got to meet all you guys, and it felt like important actually. Like, and it was like, and it felt important because A, I'd never done television before, and B, there was so much network and studio involvement about all of it. They were there for rehearsals. They would come in and out. We would have meetings. Jake would be there. It was just like this very big deal. It felt like my favorite movie is the Sidney Lumet movie Network, and it just like had a network vibe to it. It just like the stakes felt so high at the time, even though it was like a sitcom and a kiss on a sitcom of a with a very prominent will they won't they relationship, and they both they were so close at that point, and Jake is so good at making people feel comfortable, and Zoe was such a pro, and it was after this really long week of filming that was like very fun and cozy, I think, and like that. I think the most setups I've ever done in my life in a movie or a television show was the day when we did the True American thing. Like that was, I think it was like I remember we did like 177 setups. It was the craziest shit because we were just making up the rules that as we went. And then by the time it actually came to the kiss, like we figured out the blocking and we figured out the moment. It was all in the script. It was very planned. But then you just don't know what's going to happen when you say action. Like it just like, and that I'm pretty sure was the take. I mean, I'm sure we did it more than once, but like it never got better than the first time. And I remember after we did it the first take, everyone applauded, and it was like a very big deal. And it was just kind of like I just kept being like, I cannot believe that someone gave Jake and I drive-ons and like we're not parking across the street and walking onto the studio for general meetings anymore. Like it was a real pinch me moment just for that. And the
Mm.
show then came out and it was like a huge deal. And like it was like a big like water cooler, all those buzzwords kind of moment. And like it was such a big deal that Jake and I ended up getting a studio deal off of that one episode. We got a production company, if you remember. It was called Walcott. We made 0 shows. We made 1 pilot. But we had like an office on the lot. It just felt like the last days before like, Heaven's Gate like took out the studio system. It was like kind of like where pod deals were just like reckless and also pointless and like the worst idea ever. Where like you'd pick like a guy at a studio would give everybody the same person, like Gerard Carmichael, like get him to develop with you. Then everyone would take Gerard Carmichael out to dinner and like try, and then like he would go with somebody else, and you'd be like, "Fuck!" And it just was like, I was like, "How is this happening right now? Like, what is going on?" Like, and yeah, I was like honored to be a part of it, and it's still after everything I've done for however many years, like one of the things that I hear about the most is like that episode and that moment.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because like when the show aired, I watched it, but I've never rewatched the show except for this podcast.
Right.
So I kind of had forgotten about Cooler. Like I knew it was a big deal. I know about The Kiss, but I wasn't there on the day to watch it. I must have watched it, whatever that is, a decade ago now.
Right.
But then yeah, I just rewatched it. And man, it's like you get weird goosebumps, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting to hear then how produced all of it was, right? That
Very.
there was so many people, and which, as you know, when you start to like load in all the cooks, sometimes then it just you feel it when you see it. You're just like, this is there's too much going on. And that is like such a credit, I think, also to Jake and to Zoe, that they could kind of
Yeah.
like cut through all the noise that was probably happening around them. I think Rebecca Adelman, who wrote the episode,
Best.
she said that she like gasped out loud, like audibly, almost in
It
a way
was
that could ruin the
insane. It
take.
was truly insane. And like I just feel like doesn't happen anymore. Like it just like I feel like people wouldn't have had the patience to let it happen in season 2, even though some people thought it came too early. Like I just like it was such a moment. And again, the thing that makes it different and makes it feel unproduced is having 2 stars do it. And like
Right.
Jake like grabs her, like, and he's like, it's just like fucking hot. Like
It
they're both
is.
so good and they had such incredible chemistry that it just becomes iconic, and not just like a lame kiss on a television show.
Yeah, that's also credit though. It's like so much credit to you too that you could just stand back and let it happen. Right? Because sometimes when the pressure's put on you, so like on a director, I think so much, then all of a sudden their hands kind of get sticky in the business of what's about to happen.
That's when things get shitty.
Right. Like, can you just like step back and now just like trust that they've got it?
Yeah.
And we've all seen when a director can't do that. And all of a sudden then it's like stilted and you can't
Yeah.
even get like the breath of what's going to happen afterwards,
Yes.
which is sometimes the most beautiful moment, which is what happens in this kiss.
I was
Yeah.
very willing to be surprised. And I was very willing to like have the experience of they never kissed until we said action, not on rehearsals or anything like that. So I was very interested to just see it. If it didn't work, I would have said something, but it obviously I knew it would work and it did. So there was very little for me to say except like, great, let's do another one just in case.
Yeah. Amazing. What
Yeah.
an incredible moment. I had no idea. We had a few fans that wrote in some questions just for you.
Sure.
So this one is from Andy in Massachusetts. He said, Lamorne wearing the red suit from Delirious was hilarious. Just the look of him in the suit killed me. As a director, how do you enhance the comedy in that moment? Did you give Lamorne any specific directions?
No idea, but probably not. Like, Lamorne in the delirious red suit is funny enough, and there's very little you have to do to make that funnier. And I just like I just found Lamorne so funny, and I found him so patient, like to find like because he really just like his star just kept rising and rising and rising as the show went on. because the part was he came in late, and so everyone was trying to figure out like how do we make Winston iconic, where it's like actually just to embrace who Lamorne is ended up being what did it, because he's so human. You can get him doing anything. And I think like, yeah, I think like I just thought that was inherently very funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Lamorne talks about this a lot, how season one, he rewatches and it's a little hard for him because he
Totally.
can tell he doesn't know who Winston is because they didn't really know who
No.
Winston was. And so he can't really do all the brilliant stuff he's capable of because it didn't exist. There was no way for him to kind of get there. And then season two, it starts to click. They start to understand him. They start to write better for him. He starts to trust himself and like kind of dive into it more. And
It's the same
there
with
was like a
Cece.
big shift.
It was the same with Cece. Like I think like you are so disarmingly pretty that some people can first not understand how talented of a comedian you are, and how natural you are, and how funny you are, and how game you are. And so Schmidt is like we get Schmidt. Put Schmidt in any situation, they could write for Schmidt in their sleep. Nick, Zoe, like for Winston and Cece, like you guys just kept growing and growing and growing as the writers just started having more trust and understanding how talented you guys are. That by the end of the season, you guys were as good as anyone in character arcs and stuff like that, because you guys are so talented. And it was like, yeah,
Thank you for saying that. That's so kind.
yeah,
It's Lamorne and I talk about this too, where I mean, I don't know if this is something that you recognized or felt when we worked together, but I feel like when I got that role, it took me a while to almost like step out of a place of feeling so hyper grateful first, like before I could even get
totally.
to like
Yeah,
the work and the fun of it, because there was, except for Mindy who had just started the Mindy Project, like there was no, or no, she came the year after with the Mindy Project. Besides
yeah,
her on The Office, there was no one that was like Indian who was just
mm-mm.
got to be like an American friend on TV. You had to like do the weird accent, or if you were a girl, you had to be like just fully eroticized the entire
Yeah,
time. And Liz, wrote this friend called Cece. I happened to then book this role, and I happened to be Indian, and so, but she just kind of like was like, no, this is about like how she fits into the friend group, and this is her dynamics with everyone else, and there felt like this huge it was two things that were happening at the same time for me. One was like this gratefulness of like, how did I get here? This didn't exist. There was no path, right? And so all of a sudden I've landed here because Liz just
right.
saw me as like a good fit for this role. Um, and then this pressure, right? Of like making sure that if something was written that was a bit of a stereotype or push to like
Right.
finding my voice and making sure, like I felt like the pressure of all these young girls and boys that kind of look like me watching, and to go like, how do I make sure I don't lean into all the stuff that I've seen that I have found offensive, and
Yeah,
just like, and creating this idea in people's head of what a South Asian person is when we're just like
right.
humans walking this planet like everybody else. And so I remember that, and I can see it in myself in season one of taking things a little too seriously and being scared to take chances and to be able to do those things because I didn't want to do the wrong thing and hurt
Yeah,
or kind of offend what could be a massive opportunity
I know.
going forward. And it was Lamorne and I talk about that a little bit too much of like not wanting to like screw it up for ourselves. And then also just on a bigger picture of like this moment of representation. And so I'm grateful that you and I met in season two, where all of a sudden I was like, this is safe. This is a safe place. They're going to hear me if I feel uncomfortable for it. And they're always going to, like, I'd seen how the show had been edited and put together. They're always making sure that this show is in the absolute best light. And so are our characters. And
Yeah,
that was something I had to learn as this show was
I
happening because I'd
know.
never done anything before
I
on
know.
this level.
I know.
Yeah, it's
So
interesting. It was just an interesting like path, I think, for so many of us because it was so big so fast, right? Talking about you and Jake getting like a pod deal afterwards. You're just like, am I ready for this? Can I do this? Um, Wild, like the launch pad of New
it
Girl.
was bizarre. It was insane. It was totally insane. And I don't, it just, as far as network television goes, it's just not that. The show would never be on Fox anymore. It would be on Netflix, or it would be on Hulu, or it would be on FX, like whatever. It just was a different time where like the amount of people that watched the Super Bowl were watching this show on a daily basis, and or on a weekly basis. It was just such an interesting time that feels so
Yeah.
antiquated now, weirdly.
Yeah, I know. I always say it's like the dinosaur, like it was like the last of the
Yeah,
dinosaurs. Like that's not happening anymore. Too much has shifted,
totally.
too much has changed, which makes you
Like the
realize
idea
how,
that this like experimental playwright who wrote like plays about feminism and sex and like in black box theaters was like now running this TV show that like had to figure out how to make a Ford product placement like for like Ford trucks like make sense was just a wild thing to be happening. And it was like my friend Liz, it was just like it was
yeah,
so funny to just be like in the writer's room, passing the writer's room and just like see Liz like brushing her teeth in her pajamas, like walking out from the writer's room into her office. It was just like a different time.
yeah, it's weird. I feel like that's when you start to realize like that time feels just so like elastic, right?
I
Because like
know.
you can remember when y'all had nothing going on. And then all of a sudden you guys are like, yeah, kings and queens of the lot. Like, how does that
Yeah,
happen?
wild.
Wild. Yeah. I remember, I still, to the last day that we drove onto that lot, you talk about getting like the drive ons and then being able to like park like at the stage and not like
Mhm.
way deep in some parkade and like
I
walking
know.
through and like dragging your whatever your shit with
Just
you.
like on floor negative 57 of Galaxy.
And you're like, oh, I feel like if an earthquake happens, like I'm just going to be crunched. Yeah, it's strange how it happens so fast and so slow, and how it really feels like a true before and after in your life.
I know.
It's incredible how lucky we were. Okay,
Yeah.
the last question I'll ask you is from Lori in Tallahassee, which is which new girl character would you rather commit to having a weekly 8 a.m. coffee with for a year?
I would say at them in character.
It says a new
Yeah,
girl
I would say
character.
I feel like I could have I it would be like a very steady standard, she would be there on time plan if I did it with Cece. I feel like anyone else there would be too many. Um I'll choose Cece as mine.
Well, that's very kind of you. I thought you for sure would be like Nick Miller. I could talk about
No,
that
because I feel like
zombie
he wouldn't
novel.
show up.
That's also true. You'd be having coughing by yourself, which is not a
Yeah, and I don't
terrible
want to
thing
do that. I feel
sometimes.
like the most reliable answer is Cece.
I'm going to sneak in one more because I actually want to know the answer to this. What scene from New Girl was your favorite to direct? What came out even better than you expected it to?
It was definitely, I would say, in that first episode, in the cooler, and that the true American scene came out better than I thought it would because it came together entirely in editing because we just shot everything, and the whole idea of that thing is that there are no actual rules, so we were just making it up
Hmm.
like we were at UCB or something on the day, and so having to do that for like the days were so long on that show. I remember that day being like 14, 15 hours, and that came out better than I thought. And I honestly like I loved working with you guys. I loved watching Jake and Max make each other laugh and try to make each other break on set. I loved when Damon came. I loved directing scenes with you and Max. I loved working with Zoe, and I loved watching Lamorne find the character, as they started to give him more of one throughout. And like, I love seeing what everybody's doing now. And like, it just like, I was so young when I was working with you guys. We all were. And I just, I feel like it was very easy to like, again, because the days were so long and like be jaded or something, or like as it kept going on, like I feel really grateful. Like as we're talking about it, it really was like a magical time.
Yeah, it was. It's funny you talk about how honest people have been when they've come onto this podcast and shared, because there was ups and downs and challenges and hurdles and all the things. But it was, yeah, we were young and it was a lot really fast and everybody was trying to handle it the best they could. And what I always say is, man, thank goodness that we got to do it for as long as we did. Because it's like those seasons of life, right? Where in the beginning you're like, this is amazing. And then it's a roller coaster, right? And then you're family. So then you're at each other and,
Yeah.
you're like learning each other's little like isms. And then you realize how grateful you are for the whole thing again.
Yeah.
And then we got to like really close it out. And I feel like one of the biggest bonding things that happened for all of us was when they just like were canceling us. They were just like, you're done. It's over. And then like Liz is trying to scramble to write this like coda to like wrap up a series. And then we all sat and wrote letters just asking, if we could have a few more episodes to really finish our show in a way that like honors the show. And all of us, I can just see it like in my mind's eye, like all of us just sitting down individually in our apartments or houses or whatever, like
Right.
begging for the chance just to like finish it with some respect was
Right.
really like a moment where I think we realized that, yeah, all of those little growing pains we had with each other and in the show and within the characters when they tried things, that our love for the show and our appreciation for it and for all the people that
Yeah.
came and helped us tell the stories, including yourself, it just superseded all of it in spades.
Mm.
Yeah, really lucky. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out with me, Max.
I love seeing you, buddy. It's great to see you.
And I love to see you too. So that is our show. You can join us on Tuesday to recap the season 2 finale, Elaine's Big Day with the Taylor Swift. And a lovely friend of ours by the name of Zoe Deschanel will be joining us, so you don't want to miss it. Bye.